we're debuting something new, something totally new, something brand new, called Guardians of the Galaxy.
This was probably the biggest roll of the dice gamble that Marvel has ever done.
$94 million opening of Disney and Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. That obliterates the record for an August opening.
How much of a challenge was it going back in with a sequel with so much expectation and so much love for the first one?
All right, you can see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, a bop-up performance dwarfing all other competitors.
I am so tired that ending it isn't that hard. It's more a sad, giant relief.
Guardians 3 is the perfect conclusion. Pain, trauma, grief. These are just a few words that describe the Guardians of the Galaxy. What started as the first major Hail Mary for the Marvel Cinematic Universe ended up becoming so much more. What could have been nothing more than a weird little film that no one would end up caring about became one of the biggest success stories. Characters that really no one cared about from announcement of the first film to release truly won the audience over. Won the audience over so much that changes from the movies were brought over to the comics. One of the very rare examples of the crossover being film to comic instead of comic to film. How did this even work? Like everything about this, just the eye test of this team and film just shouldn't work. Actually just a cast of misfits that shouldn't be any bit successful. Something that truly should have just been known by only die-hard comic book fans. Instead is a household name. And how is that? Why does something so out there work so well? The genius of the Guardians comes from the reflection of human emotions. Sometimes the absolute hardest emotions we can try and verbalize are put on these characters as they all form a bond that is founded between broken people that so badly just want to fit in, want to fill that familial void in their life. When it comes to the MCU, there aren't many trilogies. I mean, sure, there's a couple. Both Thor and Iron Man are disconnected in their storytelling, whereas Captain America, Spider-Man, and the Guardians have a clear start and end points with the characters. The issue is, both Captain America and Spider-Man have not the best movies as part of the trilogy. Who are you? The Guardians is the only MCU trilogy that truly feels like the start and the end were planned from the very beginning, with a very major hiccup thrown in there for good measures. But this just isn't the best trilogy in the MCU. It is one of the best comic book movie trilogies ever. Sure, argue that the Dark Knight trilogy is better, and you're probably right. But for me, for my personal experience with comic book movies, no other series has made me feel the things I feel when I watch these movies. They're just fundamental understanding of the themes the movies are trying to tell, the words or sometimes lack thereof for the words to describe these moments. These heroics that aren't just about world-ending events, but these personal heroics our heroes go on. Ones that let them grow and become stronger for getting over these personal traumas, which is why there's something special about this particular group of characters. From going to something that no one really knew how it would go to becoming the beating heart of the MCU, the Guardians of the Galaxy changed the public perception of them and became staples of pop culture. The first Guardians of the Galaxy movie is my personal favorite in the entire MCU. Watching it for the first time was a ton of fun. It has the perfect amount of action, comedy, and heart. While it's just a really good movie in the overall MCU, this shit is pretty important. From this being Thanos' first speaking role to really hammering home the Infinity Stones. A lot of the scope of the impending danger that is to come is looked at here, and I think that is really neat. Okay, before we look at this movie, I think we should do the tiniest bit of a history lesson about the comics. Okay. So I'm not going to sit around here and act like I'm a fan of the comics. Outside of Spider-Man, Batman, and Superman, I read fuck all. And I'm only really getting into the latter two. So this is just going to be purely off word of mouth. The original Guardians team was created in 1969 by Arnold Drake and Stan Lee. First appearing in Marvel Superheroes issue 18, the team consisted of a bunch of people's names I just do not recognize and Yondu. Par for the course, I guess. Oh wait. Oh, they're the people in this post-credit scene in 2. That makes a lot more sense. But the version of the team everyone now recognizes was put together in 2008 by comic writers Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning. The Guardians were still a big unknown quantity, so eventually, and probably more surprisingly, the Guardians received a treatment for a script well before the 2014 film. In 2010, Nicole Perlman wrote the script, and in 2012, Marvel brought on James Gunn as the director of the first Guardians movie. The first big expansion into the cosmic world of Marvel released in 2014, and well, changed a lot. What was considered to be Marvel's biggest gamble quickly turned into a movie that would probably have the biggest beating heart in the MCU. And all of that is because of loss. There's something special about the first Guardians movie, a film that directly talks about the trouble of loss. What is the reason people fell in love with this team? Well, it could be because of the witty humor.
Nothing goes over my head. My reflexes are too fast.
The family-like dynamic, or it could be because of the shared feeling of loss. What bonds them more than anything? That they have all lost. Peter lost his mom, Drax his wife and kids, Gamora her sister and father, Rocket his life. This is such a strong narrative through line that helps make them stand out. This idea of loss, these feelings of just wanting to fit in and have a camaraderie, a family. The first movie is like the island of misfit toys in Rudolph, a group of essentially unwanted, whack-ass creations. Marvel to this point had been fairly tame with a lot of the films, the only out there thing being gods, but the gods looked like Chris Hemsworth and Tom Hiddleston, so how out there was it really? In this, there's a CGI raccoon and tree for like the entire movie. Batista is green? Gray. It's gray. Like, the movie makes no sense. It feels like it should just be all distracting. It feels like none of this should work. The movie follows Chris Pratt's Peter Quill as he learns to let others in his life. Get that family that he thought was taken away from him on Earth. This is like a real ass family. They mock each other.
No, wait, what did he look like hopping around?
They sometimes don't get along, but in the end they share this emotional connection. It's hard for me to put into words just how much I love this movie, as someone with zero real connection to this world beforehand. Other than that, it was an incredibly simple story that made me fall in love with the group of characters I had barely heard of, other than Rocket. That man was a fucking dog in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. This story had a giant impact, having the second highest opening weekend in August, still by the way, only behind Suicide Squad, the bad one. Aren't we lucky? We'll get there one day, I'm sure. It's because of this movie right here, this movie that had a ton of heart and charm, that the MCU felt bulletproof. The MCU felt so transparently popular that it could make changes to something like the source material it was based off. The character of Peter Quill is the beating heart of this first movie. The movie opens on him actively running away from his problems in the death of his mother, to only be abducted by aliens. Over the course of the film, Peter has to learn to love, essentially. Be more than just a sitcom ladies' man, open himself to be loved, truly loved by people. People who he shares a bond with, people who he sees as a family. The film plays an incredible balancing act through the multiple characters and telling us why they are the way they are, showing us why they all support each other in the end. In the heat of the moment, they become a family, and I don't know, I just adore this story. Like, there isn't some deep analysis, it's just a great family dynamic, a crazy hit that no one really saw coming. A film so good that it basically got everyone on board with the impending purple chin and all the MacGuffins to follow. This was an introduction into how wide and expansive the whole of the MCU really could be. And it worked. Not only did this pretty unknown band of misfits work, they kind of worked way better than anyone could have imagined. So this is Star-Lord in the comics pre-2014. This is Star-Lord in the comics post-2014. Awfully Pratt looking. The MCU helped something like the Guardians of the Galaxy explode into popularity. A group of misfits bonded through loss became a beating heart to the narrative of the MCU. Something so out there, yet down to earth. I'm just gonna level. Without the Guardians of the Galaxy, I wouldn't be as big of a fan as the MCU as I am. A movie so good, I just can't put into words why I love it. 10 out of 10. Guardians 2 hate makes zero sense to me. The only reason I bring this up is that I know some people just really don't care for this movie. And is it the worst one in the trilogy? Yeah, probably. But being the worst one in the Guardians trilogy is still quite a damn good superhero movie. Guardians 2 is very clearly the middle gap to get our characters from point A to point B in their story, more importantly tie us over before Infinity War, and it's pretty damn sad most of the time. Our characters are not having a great time throughout most of this movie. I also believe this is the MCU movie that I have personally seen the most. I'm a Spider-Man fan, so I like to be miserable. What can I say? There's something so beautiful about this movie though. But first, some negatives. You know that weird phenomenon when a character is really funny, so the powers that be, whether it's the creatives or the studio, just make them inexplicably dumber? I call it getting Draxed, or Kevin'd. I haven't decided. But man, Drax kinda got reduced to nothing comedy. Comedy that sometimes just isn't very funny. However, there is this moment where Mantis touches Drax and Mantis is so overwhelmed by the emotion, the pain that Drax has been through, that she cries while he sits there stoically looking into the sunset. Beautiful stuff. Other than that, the abundance of comedy a lot of the time just doesn't really hit for me. Like, it just seems like everyone is 10 times dumber than they were in the first time for the sake of comedy. However, the emotional core of this movie is outstanding, so let's talk about it. I like the overall themes of these movies, that your family doesn't have to necessarily mean your, like, actual family, you know? It shows how sometimes the most important figures of our life aren't actually the people who brought us into this world. It's the people who raised us in this world. The people who helped you get to the point you're at today. Everything with Yondu in this movie works so much, from the opening with the, yeah, this guy's probably gonna die thing, to the parallels between Yondu and Rocket, to the end where Yondu and Quill both finally fully realize their relationship, the father-son dynamic they've always had. The inclusion of Yondu in this film is the true beating heart of this film. It might not have been the most conventional love between Peter and Yondu, but it was love that had clearly been there, which was shown at the end of the first Guardians movie. So that's cool, but more importantly, it's the relationship between Yondu and Rocket that becomes the most important. There are two major figures in the Guardians team in terms of the beating heart of the themes of these films, and that's Rocket and Nebula. Due to the relationship with Yondu, Rocket realizes that even when you think you've pushed everyone away, even when you think you're not worthy of being loved, you still can/are. The Guardians are a family, and yes, the family fights a lot.
I meant Trash Panda.
Is that better?
It's worse.
They're hardly on the same page in their own movies. Always something going on, those little scamps. But at the end, when they can all share a quiet moment together, a moment where they can be vulnerable, be themselves, and still they all have each other's backs. It's those moments where the team and the themes and messages of these movies really stand out. I actually also talk about the idea of the beating heart of these films with Guardians 2, because this film really just exudes that. Guardians 2 sees the introduction of Peter's actual dad, Ego the Living Planet. And he's just a truly stand-up, swell guy.
It broke my heart to put that tumor in her head.
But this new wrinkle into Peter's life brings with it a unique set of circumstances. That and the weird mystery to go with it that Gamora and Drax continue to find bits and pieces to. Shocker, the guy literally named Ego, not a great dude. The only thing to break Peter out of this place of fulfillment, this feeling he's never had before, a relationship with his real father, is the undying love he has for his mother. A lot of this movie talks about familial love in a non-traditional way. The biggest piece of this is between Nebula and Gamora. Their relationship really embodies so much here, and the line, "all I ever wanted was a sister," is a testament to this relationship. People whose abusive adoptive father pitted them against each other, made them fight essentially for his love and affection. One is able to break free of that controlling father, while the other, the one who so desperately wanted to win, is still upset. Upset at the treatment she had been given. Upset that through it all, the one person who understood her pain moved on without her. Upset that during the entire process, she wasn't like family to her. All of these ideals, these moral dilemmas that the characters are faced with, bring them closer. Shows that all of these people in their lives who have essentially tortured them aren't what makes someone a family. Just because someone is given the label in your life, whether that be mom, dad, what have you, could in fact mean nothing. Your family are the people who help bring you up to who you are in this world. The people who raise you and make you want to be a better person. Watching the Guardians unite at the end of this movie feels earned. A family that had been fighting with each other for the better part of the 2-hour runtime come together when one of their own is in need. It's the chain that can never be broken. So, the thesis of this movie isn't really hidden. It's actually staring at us in plain sight, or in this case, audibly. The movie uses the 1977 Fleetwood Mac song The Chain twice. And on the surface, it might just seem like James Gunn picked a cool sounding retro song to be the intro to the final fight. Well, let's look at two things. First is the first time this song plays. It's when the team splits up, when Peter says, "So what's your goal here? To get everyone here to hate you?" A family at odds. Tensions rising between the makeshift family. The song cues us in on the feelings, the underlying tensions between the family. The words of the song as half of the Guardians walk away is, "I can still hear you saying you will never break the chain." The Chain in Fleetwood Mac's song talks about the falling out of a relationship between band members Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. The chain to Nicks and Buckingham simply meant to show their bond together, as if they were chained together. I think the chain in this scene simply is posing the question, what is the breaking point for this family? What will simply break it? And by the time the song kicks in again, we realize nothing. Just because someone's love for each other feels like they're bonded together, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. A family is bonded through many different things. Peter is bonded through his love for his mom, Gamora, his friends. The chain that bonds Peter to the people he's closest to is what ends up saving them all. The chain is the thesis of this movie, seeing how far you can bend it. You can attempt to break it, but in the end, it's the love that keeps everyone going, that continues to foster and make everyone better themselves. Love is a crazy thing. And what I truly love about the Guardians movies is that it isn't just talking about romantic love. It's talking about the love of family, the love for your friends, the questioning of what actually qualifies
for your family. Guardians 2 is by no means perfect. It suffers a lot from comedy that just doesn't need to be there, but at its core, it's truly one of the best emotional cores of any superhero film. A film that talks about all sorts of love, from familial to romantic to parental. It challenges the overall answer as to what a father looks like, because like Yondu says,
He may have been your father, boy, but he wasn't your daddy.
7 out of 10. No, 8 out of 10. No, 7.5 out of 10. I did not come into this with wanting to rate them, but like, it could be good for the engagement. Alright, moving on. So, how to start this? Well, let's just start with the beginning. After the once again smash hit that was Guardians of the Galaxy 2, the end of the trilogy, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was tentatively slated, and during the summer of 2018, James Gunn was fired from the project for tweets he had made when he was younger. However, he was rehired in 2019 to come back and helm the project, which for the year he was fired, kind of left this film in limbo. Like, when would this actually come out? Oh, and in the time he was fired, Warner Brothers hired him to do a Suicide Squad movie, which was fantastic, along with Peacemaker, which was also great. And after continuous disappointments from the DCEU, that regime was fired, and coincidentally enough, James Gunn was brought on to be the new head of DC. Which brings us to this, the actual end. One of the rare examples of a Marvel film having a real conclusion. Guardians 3 is the clear end. A film that was made to wrap up plots and get us to the end of the story for this team. And if there's one thing that I think defines this film and probably the entire Guardians trilogy, it's that our own personal traumas don't have to define us. But first, some negatives. Alright, the humor in this film is a lot better. A lot more controlled, I feel, than in the second one. That and most of the jokes are at least somewhat funny. Humor is objective. If you think this movie is unbearable because of the humor, more power to you. But for me, everything feels way more subdued to tell the much more serious story. However, the character of Adam Warlock has kind of nothing to do. Sure, he starts the inciting incident, and then he kind of just leaves the story. Occasionally comes back to further his redemption arc until he finally gets to complete it. Which brings me to my least favorite scene in the movie. Why? And I mean, why on earth do we need a fake out death with Quill at the end of this movie? No, like seriously, what is the actual point of this? So my least favorite trope in movies is the fake out death. I find it to be the most unnecessary and just not needed thing in a film. In this one specifically, the main reason it exists is to fully redeem Adam Warlock. Another reason it exists is from the first trailer this movie was teasing everyone about who could possibly die. And everyone, me included, took the bait. So this film was to play with people's expectations of what could happen in this movie. It takes place after the final battle, and it's kind of just like, oh, you thought we were done? I just feel like it is wholly unnecessary and more shock. Like, oh my goodness, they're killing the lead instead of doing something actually beneficial to the story. And man, that shit drives me crazy. I don't like saying you could easily do something that is better because I don't work on projects like this. Maybe it was truly the only thing that was thought of for this. But like, I just think you could have put him in the end helping save people. Or he saves one of the Guardians in a different way in the climax. Not this dumb shit of Quill going back on to grab the Zune. I just think it's kind of a lame way of doing things. As for Rocket, since his life is such a pivotal part of the plot, I think that his little fake out death works quite well. Because it actually does benefit the story. It shows the love the Guardians have for him and lets the near-death Rocket has show his continued purpose in his life, even if he thinks he doesn't have one. Alright, little rant session over. I just am driven mad by what I feel like is kind of a lazy way of doing things. But now back to the positives, because there's a lot of them. So sometimes the music choices for the Guardians movies can feel like James Gunn hit shuffle a couple times and is picking cool sounding songs. And I know each song has a personal connection to Peter since those are the songs his mom picked for him, but it still just feels like the background for your cool science fiction movie, and there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think this movie actually has the most plot-driven playlist of the three. Sure, Creep is a little generic, but songs like Do You Realize, This Is the Day, and Since You've Been Gone actually feel like they are also telling the story of the movie as well, or at least are connecting pieces to the film, whether it's to help set the tone, connect to the larger themes of the film. What I love about the movie though is how character-centric the heart of the story is. Like, this movie is about Rocket's past and the undying love the Guardians have for their own. This movie, despite him not being actively walking around for most of the film, is about Rocket, about how the hurt Rocket has been through, the pain he has experienced in life, made him the guy who is afraid to love. When the rest of the Guardians become more comfortable with each other, it was Rocket who gave them the hardest of times. Afraid to love because he just doesn't want to lose again. Rocket lost everything. Every little quirk about Rocket is explained in mostly heartbreaking detail. There are so many themes about acceptance, loss, grief in this film, and I think it just works so well. But I want to talk about is just one line. This one line solidifies the most abrasive, the most loud, at points the meanest, finally fully realize, finally accept who he is because of his adoptive family. Their undying love for him is what helps him get past his horribly troubled past. Him acknowledging that yes, he is a raccoon is not only the payoff of a long-running joke in the series, but true acceptance from Rocket, owning the haunting past and embracing just who he is, embracing the family he's found, embracing the past, and finally, after however long, being able to move past it. Before Rocket's own acceptance though, he does say one thing that becomes pivotal to the group of characters. "I'm done running" is said right before they go headfirst into danger, and what does that mean? In the moment, it means going head on and facing your past. For the rest of the Guardians, it means not to run from what might be the hardest thing they have to do. Quill returns back to Earth and Mantis heads out to find herself. This family bonded through loss now goes out on their own to find themselves. Because if someone like Rocket could figure it out, why can't they? But in the moment, we have the ending. And there's a couple things I love about this. First off, no one dies. Yes, the entire marketing of this film was, ooh, who's gonna die, winky face and the such. But I think it's even more mature for the film to let everyone live and get a happy ending. It's just such an easy answer for narratives to take, especially the end of the series, but for their final moments, to see them all grow from where they were, it's now just, they're in a better spot. It doesn't take self-sacrifice or anything like that. Instead, they all grow and face challenges they had for so long. I like how they have their new life paths set for them. And that's all because the remaining Guardians learned so many life lessons between each other. Like, them all not dying is not just a happy moment, it's super bittersweet. Bittersweet that the family we had grown to love, the family we actively saw the characters grow to love, move on. Guardians 3 does some things that annoys me. Adam Warlock's character, the fake out deaths, but to me it is the perfect conclusion of this trilogy. The best possible outcome for everyone and has such a good message. Honestly, I can't think of a better ending for the trilogy. I mean, I would have liked to see what would have happened if Gamora didn't die in Infinity War and see how the relationship between her and Quill developed, but who knows? She could have still died and Quill could have still got the same ending. But anyways, this movie has such strong characterization, a strong character-driven plot, good writing, fun action, and a truly despicable villain. My negatives I have aside, I think I'll give this movie like an 8.5 or a 9. I'm really indecisive when it comes to these ratings. These numbers mean nothing to me. And that's the Guardians trilogy. James Gunn recently said he'd like to see someone else helm up the new Guardians team at the end of 3 for a movie. But I really don't. I don't think we actually have to see any of these characters again. I think leaving them is such a strong choice. The Guardians are the best thing the MCU gave us. I feel like each film has such a charm to them, tells such a strong story to them, and overall is just the most fun I think you can have in a superhero movie. And isn't that what superhero movies are about? Having fun? The Guardians are now household names, having cartoons, video games, bigger comic impact, and I think that is pretty incredible. From the MCU's first Hail Mary to household names, it really felt like the impossible was done. But really what I want to hone in on is this sense of finality. When you look at something as long-lasting as the MCU, it becomes almost impossible to see the end. Like, there was a time, probably around 2014 to 19, a good 5 years, where this series for nerds became the biggest thing in Hollywood. And in that time, the MCU got to just make schlock and people would eat it up. People were so invested in the series and the characters in the world that they gladly ate up, most of the time, mediocre movies. Hell, I was one of those people. Whatever the MCU was releasing, I was going to watch and subsequently like. It was a true phenomenon. And now in the year 2023, things look a lot different. The MCU has dwindled in popularity. It really can't release whatever anymore and still make like 700 million every time. Instead, now the only thing that remains is remnants of the characters that made the MCU so successful to begin with. And with each passing year, the people behind the characters will less likely be inclined to continue making these films. The most prolific thing the MCU could do is end. Obviously, that's not an option because it is still incredibly profitable. But the reason recent projects like Guardians 3 and Loki Season 2 work so well is because they feel like an ending. An actual ending for these characters. Now, will these endings for the characters undoubtedly be undone with the next big old Avengers movie? Yes. God, I love these movies, and I'm excited for what James Gunn does next. We shall see if DC actually benefits from him as the big man over there. The Guardians trilogy is the best MCU trilogy, if not the best comic book trilogy, for a myriad of reasons. Characters, plot, dialogue, it all just works so well. Wow. Isn't that lovely? Just a lot of good cape shit out there. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, and subscribe if you haven't already. Once again, thank you guys so much for the recent support. It has been actually incredible, and I can't wait to see what 2024 holds.